Give me the name of the most recluse person you know in 5 photographs in environmental situations, and I can pinpoint exactly where that person lives in less than 20 minutes. Hi, this is Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. Privacy is dead in America. It doesn't matter if you're a celebrity, senior level executive, or just individual in the middle class. If you have a high income, you're on a list somewhere. Not only are you on a list, but public information makes it easy to find who you are, where you're located, the name of your family members, and enough details about yourself without even visiting social media that someone can specifically target you. Now, this is important in 2 ways. One, it's important to understand this from the perspective of identity theft. But number 2, it's important to understand this from the perspective of business development. If you need to reach a decision maker, there's no excuse today not to send them a letter or otherwise interact with them in an appropriate way. What baffles me is why so many high-income professionals, entrepreneurs, and executives are not aware of this type of security profile. The public information alone, I was able this morning to find the home address and the address of the parents of a well-known official that's been on the news nearly every night related to COVID-19. This was not hard to do. There are various databases available, but I could go further and determine what sports they're interested in, what magazines they get, what types of interactions do they have, what's the route between them and their closest relatives, what's the route between them and work. And if you're not managing your physical environment to address these things, you put yourself at significant risk. Imagine a world where class and race become the primary motivator for protest, economic doxing, and other types of issues. Now, we've had this already where news reporters have come home to people protesting on their front lawn. We've had celebrities whose information was called doxed. It's basically published on the internet. And in other areas, we are led to believe that this information is hard to get. It is not hard to get. I once heard a story about someone who described a way to find a mistress for Bill Clinton. Not to find him a mistress. He does a very good job of finding his own. But during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, very early in that, someone took a mailing list of females in a certain demographic who were within a certain area, a proximity to the White House, who were interested in romance novels, because that's the characteristic of someone who's most likely to get into an extramarital affair. And they were able to cross-reference that with employee locations. So where did the person work, which is available through credit reporting agencies. And they narrowed down 2 or 3 individuals, one of which was Monica Lewinsky. And they narrowed down that one person through the proximity to the president. So the news posted that there's a suspicion that the president is involved with somebody at the White House, and a couple searches, a couple databases, a couple lists later, a reporter had a pretty good idea who it was and was able to narrow and point in on an investigation. Private investigators do this all the time. They don't use special tools. They don't have a special private investigator database that they go to. Direct marketers do this all the time, using mailing lists and buyer lists and such. And this can be used for good as well, but I'm always interested and concerned about the lack of understanding of this when executives talk to me about their fear in bad economic times that they may get called out. I had one client telling me that they live in a $1 million plus house, for example, and they kind of roundabout, I'm paraphrasing here, said that, folks who make less don't tend to go through their neighborhood, but they do work in the neighborhood. So the landscaper, the staff on the landscaping team, and they're concerned about theft. Their kid has an $800 bicycle. They're concerned the bicycle is going to get stolen. They could easily replace it, but the inconvenience of the activity. They didn't have security cameras. They weren't very well installed, but the security cameras revealed that periodically people walk by their home at night, and they're strange people. So there's this little bit of paranoia there. Yet when asked questions about their virtual side, about their engagement on the internet, you'll find their social media page was full of very expensive boats and pictures of their backyard that had things in the background. Nancy Pelosi's an example. She was talking about how everybody is surviving through the coronavirus and how they're all staying at home. And the background picture she starts to show on this late night show, the ice cream in her refrigerator. And she had $12 pints of ice cream. Now, some of the ice cream she had, I get when it's on sale at the grocery store. But nobody ever mentioned until later that the $15,000 specialty freezer was in the background, and she has two of them. And so you'll notice in the background of some of these homes, you'll see very expensive items where there are unhinged people who would be concerned about that. They wouldn't take into account that maybe financially they were able to save it up. Maybe she's up to her eyeballs in debt. Maybe there's other factors that made possible that those refrigerators to be there and that custom kitchen to be there. But we have gone from a time where people understood that hard work will earn you things to a time where people feel entitled. Now, if we layered on top of that class and racial aspects, we could run into problems like in the 1960s. The 1960s in the United States, there were actually race riots in Washington, D.C., where large blocks of land were burned down. I'm not judging whether they were rightfully or wrongfully so. That kind of response just tends to be destructive. There were situations, I've interviewed almost 100 individuals or read interviews, almost 100 total interviews, of individuals who escaped from the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Some friends of ours over dinner, we were talking about, there were two families there. One family that left early. They noticed the signs that we talk about in many of our strategic threat analysis types of calls with private clients. They recognized the signs and they picked up and left about a month before things started breaking out. The other family stayed and was constantly harassed for Western-style clothing. So this is going up 1950s or so, going up into the Cultural Revolution. Mao is starting to take over. There's a lot of turmoil. And those who had Western ideas were considered to be outsiders. They were not good for the country. Meanwhile, they're also destroying traditional Chinese elements. But revolutions are never rational. My point being is that in the middle of the night, they got a knock on the door, and basically a crowd storms their house, beats up the father. The rest of the family tends to get out. But the next day, in hiding, they try to come back to recover some of the things from their home, and they find that many of the people who stormed the home are now wearing the Western clothing or carrying items out of their home that were criticized just months before, and essentially looting the property. Now, the father ended up in a work camp because he was also part of a resistance movement that spoke out openly against the Cultural Revolution, and he ended up pretty much getting beat to death because he refused to. And in fact, he pointed out some of these things that don't make sense. You know, you criticize X, then you raid the property to steal X, and then you utilize X. It doesn't make any sense. Again, revolution is not rational. Revolution is an emotional response to some kind of fervor. And in the long term, revolutionaries are not useful to the final movement because you don't want to establish a form of government and then have people tear it down through an emotional or a desire for change. Overall, though, without going into a lot of detail, do you have a plan for basic events? Let's not talk about revolution. Let's talk about the hurricane, a power outage, a major snowstorm, a flood, other types of events that can impact your area. Now, older, more established neighborhoods tend not to have these types of events because that's what's allowed them to be older and more established. If you live down by the river and you're below the flood line, you're more likely to have your place washed out. If you live on a beach, same thing. But if you live in a more affluent neighborhood on the hill, so to say, you tend to be better protected. But still, tornado, hurricane, wildfire, all these things are likely to happen. What's your basic plan? Do you have a basic plan to leave your home quickly, to secure your assets quickly, and to get enough forewarning that you're able to make a decision and take specific action? Do your children have a plan that if something should go wrong at their school, even if you're not able to pick them up on time, that they know other family members or other trusted adults that they can turn to get help and support? If, God forbid, there was an active shooter in their school, do they just follow what the teachers tell them, or do they have legitimate information that helps them escape and evade and manage to protect themselves in such an instance? But throw that aside. If there's a tornado, do they know what to do during a tornado? If you had an extended period of time in which they're doing road work outside your house, do you know alternate routes to your office space? And if so, if you were suspecting someone was following you, or you suspected that your route might be blocked for some reason, would you know how to get out and around? Now, many extremely wealthy individuals have teams of people who do this for them. High affluent, high net worth folks with family offices may have some of these resources from time to time, but your diligence in everyday activities helps you know to stock up on toilet paper before flu season, or to stock up on, even though flu is respiratory, by the way, you don't really need a lot of toilet paper. Your pantry management is more valuable in many of these cases than the actual response to events. But would you have a plan in place if your home was flooded? Is your insurance in place? Is your bookkeeping accurate enough to identify issues when there is identity theft? Are you aware enough of your day-to-day activities to avoid phishing scams? You can do an every door, if you don't know where somebody lives and you have an idea which neighborhood they live in, you can do an every door direct mail on a topic that they're interested in just to get them to click a link or do a QR code, and that will give you enough information about where they are specifically, and even possibly their cell phone information, so that you can trace them with the public websites that have cell phone information. All this and more we cover with private clients. Not only do we cover this with private clients, but we help you with assessments and planning. And it's not about being a full-blown prepper or a full-blown paranoid. And there's no conspiracy theory here. You should start with the major storms that can happen in your area, because an extended power outage can cost you a lot more than you expect. And it's a situation where opportunists may be targeting you because of your high income. And privacy is pretty much dead, so it's not like you're hard to find. But ultimately, privacy has been dead for years. There are practices and things that can be done in order to secure your assets, your interests, and your family members. Not necessarily in that order, because that's not an order of importance, but ultimately so that you can be more aware of situations and have a better opportunity for the outcomes you desire. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. If you have any questions about this or anything else we cover in these programs, be sure to visit us at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. You can open a support ticket, you can contact us through our offices, and we'll be happy to answer those questions either in a podcast or in one of the tutorials or private client areas where we talk about these issues in depth. This is not meant to scare you. Just because I can find somebody in 20 minutes doesn't mean that other people can't. But ultimately, what are you doing to protect your interests? How are you securing your future against at least inconvenience? And what measures do you have in place to make sure that you can remain safe and that you can remain healthy, even in the worst natural disaster or, God forbid, some kind of man-made disaster? It's a coronavirus-related topic, and it's something that those who prepared for in the past would have no concern or fear. If you are concerned and you have an immediate need, do contact our offices, and we can put you in touch with the right people. Thanks for listening. Ask your questions at www.insidestrategicrelations.com.